Let's ask some questions. Yes, ma'am.
Governor Perry, I don't have any great political statements or questions to ask you, but I'm one of those unemployed individuals. 6 years ago, I was studying for my doctoral comps. I have a PhD in public health. And I had two desires in my heart. One to serve my country and another to take care of my parents as they aged. And I had planned to go into the Army. And my last interview with the Army was February 18, 2006. And my father passed away March the 3rd, 2006. So I took home care of my mom. She's recently deceased now, about 9 months. And I can't find a job anywhere. I've applied federally and statewide, from Texas all the way to the East Coast. I have a PhD in public health and I have 2 master's degrees. I work at the mall. I make $8.46 an hour. This week I haven't worked one single bit. I work on Saturday for 3 hours. It's about $36 and some change in the pocket. I'm kind of at the end of my rope.
You're a great example of what we talk about. I don't know if all of you heard her story, but she basically said that she's got a PhD in public health and has applied for jobs across the South. She's working one day, part day, at the mall for $8 an hour, and she can't find a job. There are 20 million Americans just like you. There are 20 million Americans that are holding out hope that there is a president of the United States that will come forward and cut the tax burden. It's the reason I laid out this flat tax plan of 20%, where people across the board get a tax cut. It's simple, it's flat, you get deductions for your home mortgage, for the local taxes, we get rid of the inheritance tax, we get rid of the dividends tax, we get rid of the tax on Social Security benefits. Then you take 20% of that amount and put it on a postcard and send it into Washington, D.C. Simplify our taxes. But the regulatory side is, I will suggest, where more jobs get killed than even the tax side. When you think about the federal government coming into South Carolina and saying, Boeing, we don't want you to go into South Carolina because it's a right-to-work state, and we're gonna decide where you're gonna go. That I don't call a lot of things un-American, but when the federal government comes into a right-to-work state and tries to block a private sector company in negotiating with a state to employ individuals like you, then that's where I draw a line in the sand. And the EPA, from the standpoint of trying to block the energy production that we have in this country on our federal lands and waters, for instance, or this natural gas that's entrapped in these shale plays and the fracturing, the hydraulic fracturing process, and the federal government is questioning whether or not that's safe or not. I don't have a problem with questioning whether it's safe, but we've been doing it for 20 years in the state of Texas, and not one time has groundwater been impacted in a negative way. I don't know how long we've got to continue to question it, but it is a safe practice. And it also makes America more independent of these foreign sources of oil. I can promise you Hugo Chavez does not have America's best interest in mind. He and the president of Iran were together earlier this week talking about the big bomb. This is dangerous times that we live in, but getting people like you employed. And the way you do it is by reducing the tax burden, by lowering that regulatory climate, if you will, from our job creators. There's plenty of money out there. People are just afraid to risk their capital. Dodd-Frank banking regulations and Obamacare. Nobody knows what shoe is going to drop next. And a president who has a record, I mean, with all due respect to my friends on the stage with me, they're insiders. And you're not going to, an insider who created the problem is not going to fix it. We've got to have a president who is an outsider who comes in with a record of creating jobs. And we've done that in the state of Texas, and that model will work in Washington, D.C. as well. So I would suggest to you to hold out hope. Help is on the way. And to change this country from the standpoint of being a one-size-fits-all Washington mentality to one where the 50 states are the laboratories of innovation and they're creating the wealth and the jobs is the hope that I think Americans may have been thinking about 3 years ago when this president was talking about hope. But the hope for America is to truly get back to that free market concept of where job creators know that they are free from over-taxation, over-regulation, and they will risk their capital and have a chance to have a return on investment. They'll hire people like you at that time. Yes, ma'am.
Since you brought up your flat tax and the tax situation, Texas has almost a fair tax because there's not any income tax, which we're trying to get in South Carolina, the fair tax. So why would not the country like to have a no income tax also? I mean, I lived in Texas for 6 years.
Yes,
I loved a no income tax, okay?
Yes,
I moved to South Carolina, 7%.
Yes.
You know? So 7%, okay, sales tax is 6% plus 1, but I'm talking about income tax,
Yes.
okay? So what I'm curious, why would you want us all to have it?
Well, I actually do, and when you look at when you look at what we're talking about with our 20% flat tax, we felt like that was the best tax structure, and I would just direct you to go to rickperry.org to see the entire layout, not only of not just the tax structure, but also the spending side and what we would do on the budget and how we balance the budget by 2020 and then cap it at 18% of gross domestic product. And I'm going to talk about two other things that will truly have a long-term impact on Washington, D.C. But that flat tax that I lay out, that 20%, will basically get rid of the IRS as you know it today. That process will no longer, that agency will no longer be in place. But I want to share with you those two things that I will suggest to you. If you really want to change Washington, D.C., if you want to change Washington where you young people don't have to worry about it continuing to suck all of the money out of the economy and strangle innovation and strangle the confidence of the job creators, you pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. And we can do that. We're close to having enough of the states, and I think the American people are ready. I mean, they're ready for this revolution, if you will, to sweep across this country, and I'm going to lead that revolution to pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution, and at the same time, pass a constitutional amendment that makes Congress part-time, cut their pay, cut the amount of time they spend in Washington, D.C., cut their staffs, let them get a real job back home and work under the laws that they pass. That works in a substantial number of states. My home state, we meet for 140 days every other year. We come in those odd years. We've got 140 days to get the work done. We have a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. We get our work done. They get paid $600 a month. Then they go back to their real jobs back home and live under the laws that they pass. There is a model for this. Many states are part-time. Many states have that concept in mind. That's what our founding fathers meant for us to have as well. Yes, sir.
How do you feel about the Federal Reserve?
The Federal Reserve needs to get back to being a single focused agency. It has been expanded to multiple, I think it's even past a dual purpose agency now when you have unemployment is part of their focus, and frankly it needs to be one thing, and it needs to be how you control inflation in this country and let it be very transparent. Obviously auditing the Federal Reserve would be one of the first things that I would have work with Congress with to demand an audit to find out what has gone on. I mean, when it took us 2 years to be notified that the Federal Reserve had transferred $7.7 trillion to Wall Street banks in 2009 and in 2010, I will suggest to you that that is corrupt and that is fraudulent. I mean, when we get through peeling all the skin back off of this onion, I think we're going to find a rotten core. And the idea that Congress and Washington have had this corrupt relationship, when you see Freddie and Fannie and the Barney Franks of the world, and the clear, self-serving manipulations of our process. I mean, it grieves me. Americans are losing faith in two institutions that they should hold up as examples of virtue. Congress and Wall Street are today looked down upon. And it's because of the greed that we've seen in both of those bodies. And that's my point when I talk about it's going to take an outsider who comes in and puts into place. We've got plenty of regulations. Matter of fact, we got too many regulations. Dodd-Frank's a great example of a knee-jerk reaction by Congress to what happened. And when you had Dodd and Frank, who helped create the problem, write the legislation to fix it, that ought to be an answer right there. These two guys that helped create the problem passed a piece of legislation that's doing nothing more than the cost of compliance going up, and you on Main Street again having to pay for it. Yes, sir. Here he is. Last man.
You talked about trimming the Federal Reserve down to what you thought, just kind of paring it down. But when you talk about a lot of other government agencies, you talk about eliminating them. I'm wondering if it would be better to pare them down to what their intended purpose was, like the EPA, for example.
Well, and I've never said that I would do away with the EPA. What I've said I would do with the EPA is pull all of the regulations back since '08, audit them for whether or not they're job creators or job killers, and I would rebuild the EPA into an agency that was substantially smaller and that was there to be a repository of best practices or to help negotiate any contest between states on interstate issues and what have you like that. But the idea that they're spewing out regulation after regulation. But the Department of Commerce, I mean, why do we need a Department of Commerce to go sell America around the world? Why do we need a Department of Energy? I mean, they've never created one bit of energy, the best I can tell. And the Department of Education is, I think, Exhibit A in an agency of government that we do not need, because the people of our states can better decide the programs and how the money needs to be distributed and how, rather than Washington, D.C. with their one-size-fits-all and them picking winners and losers. And I'm talking about going back to No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top. Both of those are big government, federal programs that have not helped, in my opinion, increase our children's ability to learn or helping these young people get a better education. People, one size fits all may be great for gym socks, but it doesn't work in 50 states. You can't make all of those work. What we would do is just get rid of that agency, let those monies stay in the states and let the states decide. I trust the governors and the legislators, the school board members and the teachers and the parents to make these decisions about your children's education rather than some faceless bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. who can't even find South Carolina on the map. God bless you, and thank you all for coming out and being with us. Cover us on the 21st, and we'll have you back 4 years in D.C.